My name is Liz Tentarelli. I'm president of the Nonpartisan League of Women Voters of New Hampshire. Our mission is to empower voters, and having an opportunity like this for the voters and the candidates to share views is exactly what empowerment means. So thank you very much for coming. This forum I want to thank first the Plaistow Library for allowing us to use this facility, and to the members of the League of Women Voters of Southern Rockingham County who put it together and arranged all of this. I want to thank Dean from PlaistowAccess Channel 17, who is recording this, videotaping it, and it will be available at their website for on-site viewing. That's vimeo.com/Plaistow. And the link will also be on the League of Women Voters New Hampshire webpage. Now, we are taking written questions, and people have been nicely filling up my basket over there. But if you think of a question during the evening and you don't happen to have a card or a piece of paper, if you just raise your hand, my helpers, Karen and Ann, will come around, give you a card and a pencil. Or if you have a card, you can raise your card and Karen and Ann will collect it and bring it up to me. So apparently if you stand, Mr. Duncan, the microphone won't catch you, is what I've just been handed a card. All right. And somebody gave me a card at the last forum because I forgot to announce it. If people would please turn off their phones so that we don't hear musical interludes during the evening, that would be very nice. So the reason we're recording this, of course, is that you may have friends and family who couldn't make it, and you can tell them about this and they can watch it. I just explained the timing to the candidates up front. It will be timed. And so you will see my friend Kathy holding up red cards and yellow cards to indicate the timing. And I will ask the audience to refrain from applause, and that gives us the most time for questions and answers. And with that all said, we are now going to start with opening statements that the candidates have been thinking about. As soon as I get my board out here, and they drew cards as to who is going to go first and so on. And if I remember correctly, it's Mr. Duncan who is starting, right? Although maybe I'd better explain the color coding up here before I let you start. The people with the white name placards are in District 20, and that represents Plaistow, Newton, and Southampton. The people with the yellow name cards are in the Floterial District, House District 36, which includes those three towns plus some others. And maybe you people could.
Kensington and South Hampton Falls.
Thank you. I had it written down somewhere and had forgotten it. So you can tell I don't live here, although I did live here 50 years ago, and it looked different when I came down here tonight. So we drew cards, and Mr. Duncan is going to start. So go right ahead, sir.
Thanks, Liz. We don't have much time, so I'm going to be as quick as I can. I'm going to say a little bit about my background and then a little bit about a couple of things I'm interested in, and I think then Kathy will cut me off. First of all, in keeping with something that Liz said a moment ago, I've had two vocations in my life. One of them is as a church pastor, a Protestant Christian church pastor. So I know all about trying to get people to move up to the front and not sit back in the back. I've done that for years and years and years, but concurrent with that, I also was a college economics professor. I didn't do it as much as the others, but whenever I moved around in my churches, I would get on as an adjunct in one of the local colleges or universities and taught that as well. And I've published several boring books, if you'd like to read some of them, about my economics and the theories that I had on this and that and the other. I think that's the major things that I've done in my life, unless you count the time that when I ran a Kool-Aid stand out in front of my parents' house when I was 10 years old, but I'm not sure if that qualified me for anything besides. couple of things that there's a lot of things that I really would like to work on were I to be in this office, but I don't have time for them all. So if you want to ask me later on what some of them are, or get one of my palm cards over there and get my email address off that and write me about them, I'd be glad to discuss that with you at any time. But the one that I'm going to mention, well, the three of them I feel strongly about that I'm going to mention. One of them is inflation, the other one is taxes, and the other one is education, public education, as a matter of fact. Public education in New Hampshire is in deep, deep trouble. We fund our schools at a lower amount than any other state in the United States. We really do. We give less to our kids than anybody. Even poor states like Alabama and Mississippi give more to their children than we do for education. And it shows. And we struggle to get by with our education. And one of the ways that it affects your taxes is because the local school systems don't get much money. They have to raise your property taxes up to the level it should be in order to have a decent education thing. And that means you pay for it out of your property taxes. You just shouldn't need to do that. There are easier, more fair, more adequate ways of doing that. And the state has been sued 3 times, once this past summer, to get them to follow the law and do adequate funding for their education. And they refuse to do it. We give about the state gives us about $3,500 a year to educate a student. You know how much it should cost? And nationwide, the average is like $18,000, and we give $3,500. So that affects the schools, that affects your taxes, that affects democracy. Because our state, if our education system dies, we die. And there is a big movement within the state right now to do this voucher program to pull kids out of public schools and send them to private schools, pay for them to get out of the public schools, and pay for it out of your tax dollars, which are then raised again locally to pay for pulling kids out of private schools. It's wrong, and it should be changed.
Thank you, Mr.
Did I say amen, brother, at the end of that?
And we will come back to a question about the voucher program later on. Next up, Mr. James Summers.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mr. James Summers. Sorry, I'm from Newton. I live in Newton, New Hampshire. I was born and raised on a small farm in Kansas. I then served in the military. I was in the Desert Storm veteran. I served in the Navy. After which, then of course, moved up here in New Hampshire while I was working in IT. Worked in the IT field sector for about 28 years, and currently I'm the founder and CEO of Exagera Networks. It's a corporation in Newton, New Hampshire. As far as my education background, I received my MBA from Southern New Hampshire University. I'm currently a doctoral candidate in strategic management and economics from Liberty University, and a postgraduate student at Penn State University. I've served up in public life. I've actually served as a state rep before, up at the State House in 2010. Elected up there, I represented the town of Nashua district. At that time, it was a 3 wards section for represent 3 wards there in Nashua. I served on the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. If possible, I wouldn't mind getting back on that Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. A few of my things that I'm interested in actually pertain to that. The biggest one right now, actually, and I know it's more of a national issue than it is state right now, but New Hampshire's come a troubling time right now where we're going to, as you've probably heard, we're down to 25 days of heating oil available right now, just 25 days. We also have diesel that's down to the lowest level it's been since 1951. So there's actually people that have been rationing heating oil right now. And as you know, to fill your heating oil tank right now, it's about, what is it? I'm sorry, I'm going to get the number here. $1,400, I believe, $1,400. It's going to be about $4,000 for this winter. They actually, back when I was in the State House back in 2010, one of the things that we actually did in the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee was at that point, or actually in 2012, the Democrats actually decided to lower go from coal power, because we originally had coal power plants around Merrimack and Portsmouth. They went to natural gas. So a lot of folks went to natural gas where it was around 2 cents, 4 cents per kilowatt. Now, if you looked at your electrical rate right now, it's went from 7 cents, which it was earlier this year, 7 cents to 14 cents to 17 cents. And hopefully some of you have locked in at a low rate, because I believe now it's around 24 cents a kilowatt. So it's almost quadrupled in just the last year because of the lack of natural gas. Well, and I don't expect you all to be drilling experts, but if you knew from drilling, if you frack oil or drill oil, on top of oil sits natural gas. So if you're not drilling for oil anymore, you're not getting the byproduct, which is natural gas that sits on the top of it. Therefore, we got a shortage. Plus the fact that we have to deal with Massachusetts and New York don't allow any pipelines across their states. So we have to have it shipped in from the Fall River or have to somehow get it from Canada and brought down by either truck or rail. But that's the subjects that are important to me. It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Mr. J.D. Bernardi.
Yes, thank you, folks. J.D. Bernardi. I'm currently a rep representing Southampton, East Kingston, and Kensington, but with the flotorial redistricting, lost East Kingston, gained Newton, Plaistow, and Hampton Falls. So I've been in Concord just for a year. I was on the Science and Technology and Energy Committee, as Jim indicates he would like to be, and we're dealing with those energy issues. Unfortunately, most of our energy policy is set in Washington, D.C., so there are only limited things that we can do about it. A little bit about me. I grew up in Minnesota and have an undergraduate degree in biochemistry, joined the Navy and served in nuclear submarine force. And it was in that for 5 years and 21 years reserve duty. It was a refueling overhaul at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard that brought me to New Hampshire in 1975, and I stayed ever since. After my active Navy time, I went to law school at Franklin Pierce, which is now UNH, and then started a 40-year career in the pharmaceutical industry, doing regulatory affairs and quality assurance. Regulatory affairs is the function that actually gets you approval to conduct clinical studies and eventually approval of your drug or therapeutic. So my focus is, as Jim's is, in looking at energy issues as well as election integrity. I hope to work in both those arenas if reelected to the legislature. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Bernardi. And Elizabeth Costa.
Hi, my name is Liz Costa. I'm a resident of Plaistow. I want to thank Liz for being here tonight in the league, for offering this for all of the candidates. I live in Plaistow. I've lived here for 19 years. My husband and I raised our children here. Before we got married, I grew up in the city of Lynn. I was on the founding board of Habitat for Humanity. Housing was a big concern in Lynn, and
Excuse me, could you move the microphone closer?
Absolutely. So I grew up in the city of Lynn. I was a founding member of Habitat for Humanity, which provides housing for those who are financially challenged and have hit rough spots. Went to Northeastern University, got a bachelor's in education, worked in education for a while. We got married, moved up here to Plaistow, got my master's degree in education, special education. I joined Timberland Regional School Board for 9 years, was the chair, sat on the curriculum committee, the personnel committee, policy committee, and I've just recently been appointed to the budget committee for Timberland. And I tend to give back to my community. I also sat on the board for Merrimack Valley Philharmonic. I was their vice president for several years. I stepped back to run my campaign. My husband stepped in to be the vice president while I'm actively running my campaign. The areas I am focusing on in my campaign are schools, school vouchers, housing, reproductive rights, and just working within our communities so that you understand what's happening in the state. And I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. And Mr. Robert Harb.
Thank you. And again, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters in the library for giving me this opportunity to visit with all of you and those at home watching on cable. My name is Bob Harb. I am currently one of your state representatives, presently serving Atkinson and Plaistow. I'm finishing my second term or my fourth year. At the House, I belong to the Resources, Recreation, and Development Committee. You might ask, what does that do? Well, we're in charge of all the lakes, all the rivers, all the parks, the seacoast, the beaches, the water, and anything to do with our resources. Trees, forests. We've worked very hard the last 4 years on potable water and the quality of our water supply. And although we weren't directly involved, I want to compliment and thank Representative Norm Major for all of his work that the Resources Committee recognizes that brought a water line to Plaistow. We need portable water. I'm glad it's now here. I currently serve as vice chair of that committee, so that gives me the opportunity to see the bills that are coming forward, see the bills that affect us in this district, and be able to work for the betterment of all of those here. As I mentioned, we're also in charge of the state park, so if you happen to cross the town line going to Kingston, we're in charge of the Kingston State Park, where as a little kid I used to always go. When you couldn't go to the beach, you go to the state park, and that's what we're concerned about. Lately, I was just elected to be chair of a commission full of about 16 people that are dealing with low-grade timber to help see what can we do in the state with our timber resources to help with energy and the ecology. Many of you know me as the town moderator, so I see you at all the elections. I've been the town moderator for over 10 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed that as well as I enjoy being state rep. And some of you know me as the Timberlane Regional School moderator. So I wear a number of hats, but each hat has one item on it, service. I'm here to serve the community. What do I do in the community? I'm also chair of the St. Luke Evangelist Parish Pastoral Council. I'm a director at the Plaistow YMCA. I used to teach karate up in Newton. My wife, who's here tonight, Cindy, we co-founded the Plaistow Exchange Club in 2005 that serves this community. And I'm an equestrian that has been involved with the New Hampshire Morgan Horse Society. And for my day job, while I do all of that, I'm an attorney at law licensed in Mass and New Hampshire. I've really enjoyed, and I think I've been successful as your state rep, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harb. And Mr. Charles Melvin.
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight and listening to my propaganda. My name is Charles Melvin Sr.
Could you bring your microphone a little
Sure.
bit closer to you? Thank you.
My name is Charles Melvin Sr., and I've been a resident of Newton for 54 years. I am running for one of the 3 seats in District 20, which consists of Plaistow, Newton, and Southampton. I have been a state representative the past 2 terms. My voting record as a conservative is 97 to 100%. While in Concord, I have sat on several different committees. My first term, I was on Environmental and Agriculture. My second term, I served on Municipal and County Government Committee. The committee deals with town and state laws. I enjoy this committee because I have had a lot of experience in this topic. For instance, in Newton, I have been on the plan. I was on the planning board for over 30 years, and then I went to zoning board of adjustments for 15 years, and I have served 2 terms as a board of selectmen, where I sit presently right now. I am a 52-year small business owner. I own and operate C&M Auto Repair in Newton with my son. I received the General John Stack Protector of Freedom Award for the last 3 years. I also received the American Conservative Union Foundation for Excellence Award. I ask for your vote and support on Tuesday, November 8th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Melvin. And Nancy Bishop.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters in the library for having this event. My name is Nancy Bishop, and I'm running to be the state representative for District 20, Newton, Plaistow, and Southampton. I'm running because I believe in a New Hampshire that is. I'm running because I believe in a New Hampshire where everyone, especially families, can live, work, and thrive. I come from a working class background. My family earned their way to the middle class, and I'm a product of a solid public school education. My education was vital, and it prepared me for my 4 years of study at UMass. In my early career, I was a home health aide and a child care worker. Here I took on the concerns of the young, the elderly, and their families. I actively listened and helped people communicate effectively, characteristics I think that would be helpful in Concord. I believe the majority of the New Hampshire citizens want and depend on strong public schools. I do not support the education freedom accounts. With this program, funds are drained from the State Educational Trust Fund to pay the tuition to private and religious schools. So far, $14.7 million has been spent on this program, and I think we should be more fiscally responsible. Instead, let us provide quality, well-funded education to every student in New Hampshire, the education they deserve. New Hampshire is an aging state, and we have a worker shortage. It is crucial that we keep and attract well-trained, well-educated workers. Raising the minimum wage would be one way to address this. We have the lowest minimum wage in New England at $7.25 an hour. That in itself attracts workers to other states for employment. By adequately compensating our workers, we not only contribute to our workers' stability, but that of our communities as well. To help the economy, I think we should develop clean, renewable energy. This would mitigate climate change, which brings warming temperatures, high-intensity storms, and increased flooding. It would also preserve our environment, which is so essential to New Hampshire tourism and our quality of life. It will also create a variety of good-paying jobs. And finally, I believe in a woman's right to make her own medical decisions in consultation with her medical providers. I respect the woman's capability to make wise decisions for her and her family, and to do that without government interference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bishop. I think all the candidates have given us a good synopsis of some of their goals and some of their interests and backgrounds, so thank you for that. I'm going to ask a quick question, and a couple of you have already addressed it in your intro. That is, which committees would you like to serve on if elected in the House? You get to choose or propose 3, and then you get appointed to 1 usually. And are there any bills or legislation that you would like to sponsor that you already have in mind? So for those who kind of gave that answer, just give it again quickly as we go through it, but think about the bills you'd like to sponsor. We're starting with Mr. Summers on that.
I'd like to be my first choice would be on the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. When I was there before, we repealed RGGI, and it's come up again. That's the tax on carbon limits for pollution, to repeal that once again. And then secondly, another committee I wouldn't mind would be the Veterans Affairs. Where there's being a veteran myself, there's a lot of VA benefits that you still have to go down to Massachusetts for. And one thing I'd like to see about is the hospital be able to go to a regular hospital and then have the VA actually reimburse the hospital for it. So you wouldn't have to travel to the nearest VA hospital if it wasn't available.
All right, thank you, Mr. Summers. Mr. Bernardi, what committees would you like to continue on the one you're on or another one? And what bill do you have in mind?
Well, the 2 committees I'm interested in are Science, Tech, and Energy, and if there, one of the focuses would be elimination of what's known as the EASY Board. In the last legislative session, we transferred the responsibilities of that board back to the legislature because it sets tax limitations, and therefore the board really has no function, yet it still exists. On election law is the other committee that I'm interested in, and on that particular board, I'd be interested in dealing with the domicile issue that's causes a lot of controversy in the state.
Thank you. Ms. Costa, what committees are you interested in or bills?
My first choice would be child law, because I think it's our job to protect the children of our state. I think just in what I do for work, there needs to be some more stringent things put in place to make children safer and adults more responsible for their actions. The other committee I would like to be on is the Education Committee, because I feel as though I have a lot to offer with my background in education, curriculum, and budgeting for that education. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. Mr. Harb, what committees are you interested in? Continue.
Yes, thank you for the question. As I mentioned before, I'm currently Vice Chair of Resources, Recreation, and Development. I've learned in 4 years how important it is to move up in the ranks of the House and to be able to influence the newer representatives for positive legislation. So I would not want to move my committee. I'm hoping to stay on that committee and maybe someday move up into chair. Now, the kinds of bills that committee works on that I would continue would be to lower fees for our state parks, to continue bills to protect our water supply, continue the bills that I've worked on with water quality standards. We lowered the arsenic level a few years ago. And lastly, explore the opportunities to develop our beaches. I was on a commission that was looking into putting a pier at Hampton Beach, like many of the California beaches have. So that's the kind of legislation I'd like to do to help our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Melvin, which committees would you like to be on? Bill sponsors?
I would love to turn around and go back to municipal and county because I have an awful lot of knowledge in that, being on the planning board and the zoning board of adjustments and being a selectman in my community. We had an incident in Concord where over in Danville, we had a dog officer that had run for a position, had applied for a position and didn't get the position. So that individual ran for the position, and now she is the only elected dog officer in the state of New Hampshire. And they brought it to Concord, and they wanted us to change that position, and I did not want to change that position. I'm a strong believer in home rule.
Thank you. Ms. Bishop, what committees might you like to serve on or bills to sponsor?
Well, I'm interested in health, education, health and human services. My field of interest is mental health. We have an issue in New Hampshire where people with mental health issues, crises, are being boarded in the emergency rooms of hospitals. We just bought New Hampshire Hospital, and that will contribute a little over 100 beds, which I think is vital. But I'd like to see more energy directed, particularly with young people and the issues with coming out of the pandemic. I also am interested in substance misuse disorder, and I would like to contribute to that subject.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Duncan, committees you'd like to serve on or bills?
Sure. I'm going to mention a couple of them, and I feel bad. I looked over the list just this afternoon, and if I had known you were going to ask that question, I would have studied a little more closely. But I can mention at least two. One of them, you're not surprised to learn that I would be interested in being on the Education Committee. And for part of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, I would like to get rid of the voucher program that is bleeding our public education and other things that they have done to damage it. The way it is funded, it means that poor communities have to pay more than wealthy communities. It's just unfair and ought to be against the law. Second one, I think, would be the the Election Law Committee. I think that would be one that I would want to be a part of too. We are fortunate in New Hampshire that during the last administration, we had a committee come down and study our election because they're afraid that there were some violations here, and they found zero. We had nothing here, and we're very, very lucky to have a state that they couldn't find anything wrong. We have our elections. So I want to keep that up. I want to make sure that we still have the same kind of openness to all people to vote. We have the hardest to vote laws in any state in the union, and we can change some of that.
All right, thank you. Let's do another question. This one should be faster. She says hopefully, but these are candidates, so I don't know. We got a couple of questions on the same topic. If elected, would you support a bill for recreational marijuana? We already have medicinal marijuana allowed in New Hampshire. We've been talking about recreational marijuana for a few years now. We have not passed any bills. And should it be taxed? And if so, where should that tax money go? Multi-part question, but I think they should be fast answers. Mr. Bernardi?
I would not support a bill to legalize recreational marijuana in New Hampshire, and therefore there's no taxes associated with that. Answers the second part. But the primary reason is it's still illegal federally. And because it's illegal federally, that sets we're setting our citizens up, and those states that have done it have set themselves up for if you want to enter the service or you want to enter the police force or something like that, now you have to lie on your forms because, oh yes, I didn't take drugs, but I did take drugs. In addition to that, the state of Colorado, which first jumped into this mess, has created a circumstance where they have really highly concentrated crime associated with that industry. So I'm totally against it.
Thank you. Ms. Costa, for or against a bill on recreational marijuana?
I would be for this bill, and I think what we need to do is set the bill up so that when the federal government lifts that law off of the books, it's able to go into place. I have listened to the people on this panel from last week, and you listen, you process, you find solutions. What I think we should do with the money is rehab. Find ways to, put rehabs in place for people who need it down the line.
Thank you. Mr. Harb?
Again, thank you for the question. As some of my fellow representatives have mentioned, I would be against a bill to make recreational marijuana legal for two reasons. The first reason is I took an oath of office to uphold and defend our Constitution and the laws of the United States and the state of New Hampshire. And as was mentioned, it's still a federal violation and a crime to be involved in it. So I could not support that. I would be going against my oath. Secondly, when this came up before, I received a lot of calls from school administrators, school teachers, and people involved in school administration begging me not to support a bill like this. They were concerned, as you may know, about the rapid growth of vaping in the schools and what danger this could be to the children in our schools. So to protect our children and to support the laws of the United States, I would say no.
Thank you. Mr. Melvin, yes or no on recreational marijuana?
I'm a yes. And my reasoning behind this is they do it in Canada, they do it in Massachusetts, they do it in Vermont, and they do it in Maine. You're not going to save anything this way. I would like to see it legalized and sold through the liquor stores in the state of New Hampshire. And I think we'll keep our kids much safer because if not so much our kids, but our adults, the ones that are doing between 18 and 35 that are dying from opioids. They're getting these opioids out of the marijuana they're buying on the street. So, yes, I am in favor of it. And I'd like to see the money go to rehabilitation.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Bishop, would you vote for or against a recreational marijuana bill?
Yes, I'm in favor of legalizing marijuana. I think the states around us all have legal marijuana, and our citizens just go over state borders to obtain it. I think it should be taxed. I think it's purely recreational, and I think we need the revenue, and I think it should go to education and mental health.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Duncan, would you vote for or against a recreational marijuana bill?
That's a different question than you asked earlier. Would I support it or not? And I wouldn't.
Yeah, well, all right.
But still, I understand.
I'll go to my original one. Would you support it if elected?
I would not necessarily campaign for it or support it because it's just really not seemingly to me very important. It is a wave that's coming, and the state will finally take it on sooner or later because everybody around us is. The nation's going to do it, so we might as well. I wouldn't fight it at all. I just wouldn't be a campaigner for it. And I agree with a lot of my colleagues here. If we're going to have it, I would tax the thing so we could spend it on things like drug and alcohol rehabilitation. There's a lot of needy people in this state that could use a few extra bucks if we could figure out a way to raise it for them. I mean, that'd be a fine way to me to raise money for those things too.
Thank you. Mr. Summers, would you support, or did I say that right? Would you support a recreational marijuana bill? And if so, where would the tax money go?
Thank you.
Assuming there's tax money.
Thank you very much. While I do see there would be tax benefit, I am actually against it, and it's for a couple of reasons. One is that it's still illegal nationally. Secondly, they've had cases in California of where it is actually, well, first of all, let me go back. The farm grown is actually 50 to 100 times stronger than what it would, like simple weed on the side of the road. And it's actually keeping stronger with no limitation. Thirdly, is that they've had cases in California where fentanyl and fentanyl traces have been found in it. And as we know from fentanyl, there's been enough fentanyl sent across the border just this year alone that's actually could kill the entire world 3 times over.
That is sad, isn't it? So thank you all for your comments on that. We're going to change gears here. What steps do you plan to take to halt climate change? All by yourself.
Oh my
gosh. And that's what the question says. So let's think of it. Do you see any legislation that New Hampshire should pass to reduce the progress of climate change, to reduce what's happening? Ms. Costa?
I honestly think that we need to find ways to get some renewable energy to get rid of some of the fossil fuels and just kind of practice good recycling, reuse, and all of that. My daughter is going to school for environmental science, and she's working on, we had a question last week on water, so that's her concentration is dirt and water. And I don't want to answer wrong, but I do think we need to look at renewable energy and getting rid of some of our fossil fuels in the state and follow suit with the rest of New England.
All right, thank you. Mr. Harb?
Thank you for that question. I would support renewable energy credits, tax credits, and try to give those credits to our businesses that are probably the best to go out there and do that work, but incentivize them with some tax credits. I would do that, and I would look at other alternatives. I know some people don't like windmills, but I think that's a good alternative to review and look at, a way that we can easily support that renewable energy. And I know in Massachusetts, I'm involved in a couple of projects with solar arrays and battery arrays that store energy so that there's other ways to produce it. So I would support that.
Thank you. Mr. Melvin, are there bills or things that you would support for to reduce climate change?
I don't believe that we really are having a climate change, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Ms. Bishop, any bills you'd support?
Well, I think we should improve net metering for those who already have solar energy so they can provide more energy back to the grid. I would support wind projects. I think that's an important asset we have being on the coast. And I would support solar farms within the state.
I didn't hear that. Solar
farms.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Duncan?
I don't think I could add too much to what everyone here except for Charlie has said. And I'm just, it's frankly the case that everyone across here has some ideas about solar farms, solar energy, windmills, all those kind of ways, wind energy instead of fossil fuel energy. And I would support all of those. Those are very, very important. We're going to die soon. The numbers crunched on how many people lives that will be lost in the next 20, 30 years if we don't change our ways real quickly is terrifying. And you can just look around about the famines and the droughts and the floods and the hurricanes that we're witnessing right now that we never have before. It's just clear. We're going to die if we don't change.
Mr. Summers, what specific things might you support to reduce climate change here in New Hampshire?
The first thing I would say is that, and it was actually tied to, they found back in 2012, Science, Technology, Energy Committee, is the cleanest fossil fuel is natural gas. And therefore, I'd like to, and it came up before in the committee, actually, have a pipeline, since Massachusetts won't allow a pipeline, continue on the pipeline from Canada into New Hampshire, allowing natural gas to be able to come in here, and actually to be able to extend natural gas to where we could actually go away from heating oil so much. Secondly, I'd like to add that it's good, and I'm all favor of moving towards renewable energy, but we can't do it so fast that our power grid can't keep up with it. If all of us went to electric cars right now, as California is finding out, you wouldn't be able to have the electricity be able to charge all of them at once. In fact, on a hot day, after they said they're mandatorily going to cars, they're going to go mandatorily to cars for the foreseeable future after 2035. The very next day, they said it was 82 degrees out. Turn up your thermostats and you can't charge your car.
It's sort of a problem if you can't charge your car if
Exactly, you're not going anywhere.
someplace else. Okay. Mr. Bernardi, are there any specific things you would support to reduce climate change?
I fundamentally disagree with the premise of the question if you assume climate change is caused by man. 10,000, 15,000 years ago, if we were here right now, if we were here then, we would have been under 1.5 miles of ice. That ice did not melt because of people running around driving SUVs and spewing carbon dioxide. There is no consensus that carbon dioxide is tied to temperatures. You can look historically, and we've had 5-6 times the amount of carbon in the air as we do now, and the temperatures were lower. So I don't accept the premise of the question, and therefore we should have energy programs that basically are market driven.
All right, thank you. New question. In 2021, a bill was passed as part of the budget that restricted some abortion rights in the state, made specific restrictions on it. In 2022, some of those restrictions were lifted. It's very hard to phrase this neutrally. You can see I'm working on it. And including the vaginal ultrasound requirement, and it allowed for late-term abortions in case of fatal fetal abnormalities. So that's kind of the background. So in 2023, if elected, and in light of the Supreme Court ruling that Roe v. Wade is no longer the law of the land, do you see the need for any changes to abortion laws in New Hampshire? And we're starting with Mr. Harb on this.
Again, thank you for the question. It's one that comes up every time we meet. I would not see any change because I think the current law, as it's been amended a number of times, as the moderator mentioned, allows a freedom of choice for women for 24 months. And then it gives protection. Weeks.
Only elephants go that long, I think.
Only a gentleman would mess that up, right? 24 weeks. And then it changes the scale to protect the unborn. So I think it accomplishes the two things that everybody's concerned about, pro-choice and pro-life. So I don't think I would support any change. I think we're okay where we are now as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Melvin, would you support any changes to the current law in New Hampshire?
Actually, I voted for the current law in New Hampshire. Uh, I myself personally is against abortion, but I do believe your body, your choice, very strongly. I believe also that if it's incest, rape, the life of the mother, then you should be able to abort the child. But like I said, I voted in favor of the 24 weeks, and my reasoning for that was because the ultrasound was in there. And I was in hopes that if she was going to abort the baby and she saw the baby, maybe she might not do it.
Ms. Bishop, would you change any of the current abortion laws in New Hampshire?
Yes. I think there should be exceptions for rape, incest, in the life of the mother. I also believe there are rare exceptions, but sometimes a woman might need a late-term abortion. And I think that's a medical decision that has to be made. And I think that should be decided on the individual basis.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan, would you make any changes to the current law?
Probably not much. If I did, I feel bad that Charlie, he and I have talked about this once before, and he and I are very much in agreement about abortion. Dislike for it personally, but don't feel comfortable
Right.
legislating that for a woman. The way you phrase it, you stole my words from me exactly.
Didn't mean to.
Yeah, okay. I might, the only thing I could possibly add to that is that I might be more favorable for abortions a little bit later in the process, because there are times, as my friend here said, that there's dangers to the mother, to the life, and sometimes those things get really complicated towards the end. And I hate drawing a line that's just very, very clear. It's easier at the beginning part of it. It's more and more difficult toward the end. But there are occasions when you just have to do that, and the doctor and the mother and the partner, if there is one, and a priest, if there is one, should get together and pull that out in the most compassionate way possible. However, I would also say at the end of that conversation, the woman gets 51% of the vote, because we men in the circle don't have a right to really finally say that to her.
Mr. Summers, would you make any changes to New Hampshire's abortion laws?
Actually, I'm okay with the current New Hampshire law at 24 weeks. I based on it a little bit differently, and that's because of the current. We all know, or at least most of us should know, somebody who's had a premature baby, and the average age of them premature to be able to live a healthy life right now is around the 6-month mark. As science gets better, it might move down to 5 or so. So I try to go by at least the average viability mark. So right now we're at 24 weeks, so that's fine with me.
Thank you. Mr. Bernardi, would you make any changes?
I think the current law effectively codified Roe v. Wade. At the 6-month point, the state's interests are there, and that's essentially what the legislature did. I think what is likely to come up in the next legislative session is to move to a earlier time point. If you look at Europe, basically every country over there has a ban after about anywhere from 10 to 15 weeks. And the only exceptions are the UK and Netherlands, which are at 24. So that's probably going to be the discussion point, and I could support bringing it down to that point.
You would support
I would support
reducing
the
okay.
time point to 12 to 15 weeks.
Thank you for clarifying that. Ms. Costa, are there any laws? How would you change the law, if at all?
What I would add into the law is the life of the mother. I think that's very important. I work with families who have children who are born at 24 weeks, and it is a road to support that family, and it is very difficult. And I wouldn't change anything. If I am elected, I will not vote for anything less than the 24 weeks. Nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. This could be a very quick question, I think.
Not with this crowd. I don't.
I'm worried about it. I know. Should state representatives who supported an effort such as, I won't even give the bill name, such as that bill last year for New Hampshire to secede from the United States,
Oh, for the love of Christmas trees.
be allowed to serve in the legislature? And we're starting with Mr. Melvin.
That's kind of like a joke, isn't it?
Well, it would have been a joke, except that the bill really happened.
I know the bill happened, but it was a foolish bill.
Okay, but now that the question is, should those people who either sponsored the bill or voted for it be allowed to serve in the legislature?
As long as they're a resident of the state of New Hampshire and part of the union, then they should be able to.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bishop?
I know this is a controversial issue, and I really haven't given it enough thought to make a firm decision. I understand the reason why people would not want the representative to serve, and I think we do need a certain amount of responsibility amongst our representatives. But I'm going to decline to answer one way or the other right now.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan, should those people be allowed to serve in the legislature?
No, I don't think they should. I think if you don't believe in your state and you want to pull it away from the United States of America, then you don't have any business being in the legislature. I think that's pretty simple. And there is a strong movement in New Hampshire to do that very thing. You've all heard about the Free State movement, what they're up to and what they're doing. They're trying very, very hard to pull this out of the United States. They've said so. It's up front. They're in print, in interviews. It's not a secret. That's what the aim of that is. And this bill you're talking about was proposed by one of them and was voted on by some of their followers. We can't let that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Summers, should the secessionists, so-called, be allowed to serve in the legislature?
I believe that America's a representative republic to where the people actually have the right to vote for the person to represent them. Therefore, I believe that this decision is completely up to the constituents of that person. And so if that person happens to vote that, then in my opinion, maybe they shouldn't re-elect them, but it's completely up to the constituents that they represent, whether they get elected or not up to anybody else outside.
Mr. Bernardi, should they be allowed to serve?
Yes, the Constitution of New Hampshire defines the criteria for being electable as a representative. Having an opinion on secession is not one of the criteria. So I concur with Jim Summers here. If the individuals, the individuals in that district want to elect that person should be able to serve. I did not vote for that particular piece of legislation, and I don't believe it was wise. But it's up to the voters in that district who they want to elect.
Ms. Costa, should they be allowed to serve in the legislature?
Well, I would have to agree with these two gentlemen over here that yes, let their constituents vote them out, which is what has happened in the state of New Hampshire with that question. They have been 12 out of the 13 did not make their primary. So their constituents spoke, and if it comes up, I will definitely vote against it because I do feel that it's almost an insult to the constituents.
To make clear, there were only 13 votes out of the 400 in favor of it.
Correct.
So we knew it wasn't going anywhere, but it did come up. Mr. Harb, would you believe that those people who supported it should be allowed to serve in the legislature?
Again, thank you for the question. I think if the people were duly elected at the time they presented the bill, and it's only a presenting of the bill, I think you can't censure them at that point because they just presented it. However, the power of your vote when they came up for re-election, or I know some people ran for other offices, I have seen that they don't get your vote. as it comes up for reelection. And that's where the power is. The power is with you, the people, us, the people. If you don't like what somebody's doing, don't vote for them. Go vote. Go out November 8th and vote, please. All of us here at the panel want you to go out and vote. And that's where the power is.
And bring a friend, and bring your neighbors, and offer rides to people who can't get there. I mean, the importance of this election can't be diminished. We have to have a good voter turnout for all kinds of reasons. All right, new question. And this was mentioned by some of the candidates in their opening statements. Specifically, we're going to talk about the education freedom accounts, also called school vouchers. Currently, we have, I've lost the number. How many families are taking part in that?
3,025.
3,025, thank you, Ms. Costa, students or families taking advantage of it. The question is, would you make any changes to the school voucher law if elected? And if so, what would those changes be? Ms. Bishop?
I would like to see that voucher program repealed. I do not support it at all. I think, as Stan mentioned, we fund education at the lowest level of the United States. I think we should reallocate tax money to go to public schools. And if people want to send their children to private schools, I think that's their own personal decision and they should fund it.
Mr. Duncan, school vouchers, you mentioned it earlier, but focus here on it. Thank you.
Mrs. Bishop just gave my answer, of course.
You can say ditto and we can
No,
move
it's
on.
okay. That would be far too short. I did tell you I was a preacher for a living, right? Yeah, I agree. I don't like the program. I think it costs a fortune, and it's going to get worse and worse. And they're going to have to. Right now, the money they thought it was going to cost $200,000 or $300,000, and it costs close to $9 million the first year, and like $14 million the second year, and it's being funded out of the education fund, which is about to go bankrupt, and then they're going to take it out of your taxes. So you're going to have to raise taxes home to pay for it. It's just a really bad bill.
Mr. Summers, what would you do about the voucher or education freedom account bill?
I would honestly say right now, I would have to look at it and study for it, and I could not give you a definite answer. And why is it? It's because, yes, it can be more expensive, but at the same time, right now, especially after the pandemic, I don't really trust our public school system. And I'm saying just a report card for the school system came out this week. What we had, this is just New Hampshire numbers. 4th grade reading level down 2 points. 25% of all students are below basic reading level. 4th grade math level, 5 points. 32% below basic math level. 8th grade reading down 5 points, 27% below basic reading level. And 8th grade math level down 9 points, 36% below basic math level. Maybe if more time was spent on reading, writing, and arithmetic in our school, instead of teaching them about sexual orientation, pronouns, and gender identity, maybe they'd be able to do better.
Mr. Bernard, thank you. Mr. Bernardi, would you make any changes to the school voucher education freedom account bill?
Currently, the limit is set at 300% of the poverty level for being eligible. So if anything, I would raise that level to allow more people to take advantage of the program. I think it's an excellent program. It puts the public education system back in a competitive mode, and that's what is needed. You just heard a great number of statistics from Jim Summers here about how poorly the education system is doing. It needs competition, and if parents think that their students can do better in other places, then we ought to offer them that opportunity.
Ms. Costa, what would you do about the vouchers education freedom account program?
Well, if we weren't able to repeal it, what I would look at doing is having parents reapply for that money annually. As it stands now, parents only have to fill out that form once, is my understanding. So a parent could be at that 300 mark or 500% mark, but then their financial circumstances change and they're doing better, but they're still going to get that money where someone else could get it. I just think parents need to reapply annually to make sure that it's going to the right families and the right people. But I would repeal it and have it rewritten.
Thank you. Mr. Harb, would you make any changes to that program?
I'd like to give this program a new title, and the title I'd like to give it is School Choice. And I'm always in favor of people having free will and being able to make choices. And some have presented this to me as a parent's right to choose the school that their children attends. So as school choice, I'd have to support school choice. Now, if you've heard the panel talk about the economics and fiscal component of it, I would support a study from the House to look at it and study the program's fiscal component and see if there's a way to make it better. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Melvin, where would you stand on this program?
Well, I believe in the Education Freedom Act. I do not like what's going on in our schools right now, and I would be repetitive if I repeated exactly what JD has to say and James Sumner's, because I feel the same way.
Thank you. The problem with the school choice designation is that some people are using it to mean that among the public schools, families should be able to choose which public school they go to. So if I could throw that out to the panel for a real quick answer, would you support changing the way our public schools work so that a family could make the choice, instead of going to Timberlane, to go to Pinkerton, for instance, or something like that? Could I just get a quick answer on that?
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
You would?
I wouldn't.
Would not have a problem. Okay. Ms. Bishop?
I would. I think every educational system should be adequate and supply excellent education for every child
In their own
in
school.
their own district.
Okay.
Every school in the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan, should parents be able to move between school districts by choice?
I wouldn't go out and campaign for that, but I would have far less problem with that than the system now that we're paying students to leave the public school system to go into private and then cratering out the public school system and then blaming them because they didn't have any money and couldn't teach well. So it's at least better than that. But I'm not particularly fond of school choice in general.
Okay. Mr. Summers?
While I see it would be benefits, because I do believe in parents having the right to be able to, of how their children are educated, I believe that the NHIAA Athletic Association for the state of New Hampshire would have a problem with stacking some schools over others.
We always have to think of athletics. I understand that. Mr. Bernardi, would you support that kind of school choice?
I would support school choice like that. And I think, again, I go back to my comment that what we need is more competition, because I think that will drive excellence in the educational environment.
Ms. Costa, would you support it?
Yes, I would support that. It would be a hot budgetary mess between districts. NHIAA, yes. And also I think you could stack the deck for the music programs. Timberlane's pretty good. So,
Mr. Harb, would you support that kind of school choice?
I would support that kind of school choice and probably further recommend a study to make sure that what would the impact of that be on all the school districts?
Yeah, certainly studies of something like that would be very good. Thank you. At this point, does anyone have a question that you didn't get to write, but you would like a card and write it down? Are there any other cards there, Karen? Would you check that for me, please? Or Anne? Thank you.
Empty.
It's empty. All right. Nobody else wants a card. All right. I will go on with what we have. Two of these have to deal with, if you're elected, what are you going to do now in terms of working across the aisle, bipartisan action on some of the things that interest you. Do you have any specifics on how you would deal with that? We're going to start with Mr. Duncan.
I don't think I could come up with any specifics, but I want to make a broader philosophical statement about that. New Hampshire has always been known as the, live free and die, or, we are free interacting kind of people, and my freedom ends at the end of your nose. Remember that line? Or, you can do whatever you want to as long as you don't hurt somebody else. We used to be able to get together, and I disagree with you, you disagree with me, and in the legislature we get there and we hammer it out, we talk it over, we'd have coffee, and finally come up with an issue that we believed in because we all were on the same page. We may have disagreed on how to get there, but we agreed that we had a common good, and we're not there any longer. And I think the idea of us being enemies because we're across the aisle from one another has got to go, or our nation as a democracy is going to go. So I would work towards that, even though I can't tell you specifically how it happened just now.
Should we change the seating order in that? No, I'm serious. There was a time when the seating order was staggered. You were sitting with other parties. It is not now.
Interestingly enough, I don't know about New Hampshire, but there has been some resolutions to try to get that to happen to the national level every now and then.
Yeah.
Haven't seemed to have gone very far, but people have worked on that.
So I'll ask the incumbents, they particularly can comment on this. Mr. Summers, bipartisan action, what might you do?
Absolutely. There's actually a couple that we actually worked together before when up there in Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. One back then was because natural gas was so much more favorable than oil or home oil. It was to expand the natural gas to more homes in the state. And secondly was with the North Country lacking high-speed internet, was to increase the high-speed internet capability for New England. So that was something that both was very bipartisan in the committee I was in.
Thank you. Mr. Bernardi, how would you work bipartisanly in the legislature?
Well, I agree with Mr. Summers. In fact, in the last session, we continued on with the work on bringing high-speed internet to the northern part and the other underserved parts of New Hampshire. I think where there are non-controversial issues, the parties work well. But where the lines have been drawn, it's not going to happen, and it hasn't happened. And if you look at the votes inside the House, you will see that on any controversial issue, it's virtually 100% party line vote.
Did you have a sense in the last session that there were issues that became partisan that shouldn't have been?
No.
Okay.
They were there right from the beginning.
Right from the beginning. All right. Ms. Costa, how would you work in a bipartisan way if elected?
Well, I kind of like the every other seat. I think we need to find, the simple solutions first where we can agree. Then we have the conversations. I know that I've had conversations with my state reps. I'm a Democrat, they're Republicans, but we've had sensible conversations, and we may disagree, but they've heard me and they're thinking about what I've had to say, and they go back and they bring it to their vote. I may disagree with what they voted on, but we're having that conversation in a civil manner. And that's the most important thing, because we're not going to get anything done if we are not working to get that little hole in the wall to crumble down a little, so that we're working on more things together.
Thank you. Mr. Harb, how might you work in a bipartisan way?
Again, thank you for the question. I'd like to say I am currently, and for 4 years, I've been working in a bipartisan way, especially in my committee, the Resources Committee. It falls under two words that I'll throw out: respect and relationships. I respect all representatives, no matter what party they're in, and I move to create relationships with all representatives. But then the next level is leadership. I've served 2 years in the minority and 2 years in the majority. We had, when I was in the minority, the same good relationships and respect with all of our committee members, and we accomplished a lot together. Why? Because we're all serving for the best interest of the citizens in the state. And as vice chair, That's why I'm running again. I see as a leadership, I can continue with that bipartisan effort to work with all people, all representatives, to get things done, get them accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Melvin, how would you work in a bipartisan, or do you work in a bipartisan way?
I do now. And
Could you give us an example?
sure. On my first term, I was on environment and agriculture, and we had a bill that came in reference to waste management, increasing the landfill up north. And I am myself a level 1 solid waste operator. And what I did is I brought all my information in on transfer stations and landfills and gave it to a Democrat so that she could give it to the rest of her Democrats so that they could understand it a little bit more.
Thank you for doing that, sir.
Oh.
Ms. Bishop, how would you work to increase bipartisan activity in the legislature?
I think when there's a disagreement, I think everybody's need is to be heard or feel they have been heard. And I think people have to sit down and share more ideas. I don't know. I think you can only teach respect by example. And I think that's what has to be more in the legislature. Charles just gave us a great example about bringing material to somebody else, something concrete to learn from, and that's how you learn and perhaps persuade somebody to do something different.
Thank you. I was up in Meredith on Monday, I guess, doing a forum, and one of the candidates there, who was an incumbent, said, "Well, I started the beer caucus." At which point we said, "The what?" And this is a group of both Republicans and Democrats who regularly go out for a drink together and discuss issues non-controversially. And his argument was, we've learned a lot from each other. I guess the beer helped. That's all I could say.
It does.
If elected, obviously you'll be elected by some of the people, but not all of the people. So how do you plan to listen and consider the concerns of your constituents who did not vote for you or who are on the other end of your political spectrum? And we're starting with Mr. Summers.
I think it's very important to keep an open door policy to where be able to, it might seem difficult, but to actually write up a bill and have the LSA department actually write it up for you, because they do the fancy thou and shall and all the fancy words to it. But it's actually pretty easy to get it going to where you need to keep an open door to be able to listen to folks of what they want to pass, what they're interested in. And then even if you don't agree with it, at least you can at least give them information to the committee that would fit in, to who they could bring it to actually be able to bring it forward. So at least be a helping aid to whatever they're interested in.
Thank you. And where am I? Okay, Mr. Bernardi. Dealing with your constituents, how would you deal with them, be open to them, etc.?
So most of my communication with constituents has been by email. If people are interested, they'll send me an email requesting I take a position or evaluate something. I always look at those, and if possible, if I have time, I always respond. Here's what I see you said. Here's how I think this is going to play. If they're talking to me and I'm not the right person, I need to direct them to another committee where there's other representatives that are going to deal with that issue more directly. I will do that, and I've done that while out campaigning too. People have I always ask campaigning, what is it that you would like to see? And if I get a request for something, I will pass that request, if it's relevant, on to another representative that actually works in that area.
Thank you. Ms. Costa, how would you deal with constituents on the other end of the political spectrum?
I know that one of our reps down at the end of the table has had office hours. And I've joined those a few times. And I think it's important that you are available to listen to what people like what you're voting for and what they disagree with, and have those conversations. Always have that open door. I'm really hoping that if and when I am elected, I will be able to figure out how to do some office hours throughout the 5 towns, because it's really important that I'm accessible to people. And when I was on the school board and any other committees I was on, I was always accessible to them. And and getting back and giving them answers. And if I don't have the answer, I'll get the answer and report back to them and tag someone on to that email or that phone call, so that we are all on the same page when it comes down to the red card.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. Mr. Harb, how would you work with your constituents?
Well, thank you again for that question. Although the count after the elections doesn't reflect it, the first thing I have to say, I've never spoken to a constituent that actually told me they didn't vote for me.
No, we've learned we don't do that.
As was mentioned, the last 4 years, I've had office hours both in Plaistow and Atkinson. When COVID hit, I did Zoom meetings with constituents and said, you can come meet me at Zoom if you don't want to meet me in person. My home phone's published and it's on the internet, and I get calls at home. I get emails. I treat every constituent not by whether they voted for me or not, but what can I do to help them? And then if I can, I do. And if I need to direct somewhere for them, I'll do whatever I can to help. And I constantly get requests for someone to have me intercede in an office or in some position, and I do that. So that's how I address my constituents.
Thank you. Mr. Melvin, how do you interact with constituents?
Well, I interact with them now. There's 3 Democrats in my town that are high-ranking Democrats. I answer all their questions for them. I give them my opinion. And to be honest with you, all 3 of them donated to my campaign.
Thank you.
Donated to my campaign.
Ms. Bishop,
Not a lot of money.
how would you deal with constituents on the other end of the political spectrum from you?
I think it's a representative's responsibility to represent everybody and be particularly open to people that do not vote for you. I think the most important thing you can find out is why they do not vote for you. And then you can address the issue, have some conversation, and at least understand their perspective. I like the idea of having office hours, and I do, when people ask something of me, I definitely get back to them, and I think giving a response is a good way to build rapport.
Thank you. And Mr. Duncan, how would you deal with this?
Probably fairly similarly to most of my colleagues here. Jim mentioned having an open door policy, which is a really good idea. It's not always easy to implement that, but it's a great idea to put it out there. And then return the emails and the calls as soon as you can and respond to them. Just listening to people when they complain, listen to people when they present some views that you don't have is a helpful thing. Let them know that you really care about them. They're not just a vote, they're a voter. They're a person who has a life, and they have interests and needs and wants and need you to like them and to care about them and to work for them, even when you have to bend a little bit to make sure you're being responsive to your constituents. People care about that, and they respond to it, and they'll like you back.
Thank you. I'd like to share with the candidates and with the audience what happens in my town and the neighboring town have been joined together in a district for 20 years. It didn't get broken up by 3 districts, so we got 10 more years to go. We have 2 reps, and for some strange reason, we consistently elect 1 Democrat and 1 Republican from these 2 towns. And they have been holding office hours alternating between the 2 towns monthly. Both reps are there. They talk about what's happening in their committees or in the legislature, and they listen to the constituents who bring up questions. So it's something that you might consider as a way to relate to some of your new constituents, because I realize you're in a new district. But instead of individually, do it as the whole team, whoever gets elected. Just an idea. And now we have to do our closing statements, 1 minute. And is my memory correct that Mr. Melvin is starting with that?
Yep.
Go right ahead, sir.
Well, back in 2012, I turned around and I met with Nancy Stiles. She was a senator at that particular time. And she asked me if there was anything, I was a selectman at that time. She asked me if there was anything that I could do, that she could do for Newton. And I told her basically we had the Rose Corner intersection that needs repairs. And I worked with her until she decided not to run for Senate anymore. And then I started working with Janet Stevens. And on January 17th, we're going to be having public hearings for that intersection, and it's going to get repaired. I like to accomplish things.
Thank you. Ms. Bishop?
Yes. I would like to say that I would be accessible to my constituents. I think that's really important. And some of the issues that we did not bring up that I would like to address would be continuing on the education theme, is shoring up our community colleges so we have good job training and vocational training. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's fine.
But I am committed to an open door policy, and I do want to serve the people of the district.
Thank you, Ms. Bishop. Mr. Duncan?
Oh, there's so many things one could say about that. There's so many
You've only
things.
got a minute.
I only got a minute. In taxes, education, healthcare, environment, all really powerful and important things. Infrastructure important. But philosophically, I think one of the best things that we can do, if we all look together on it, would be to act like Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, rant and rave during the daytime, and then go have a beer later on. And build the camaraderie that makes the government work, as opposed to a kind of a thing of throwing verbal hand grenades at one another. I call that verbal drive-by shootings. Don't do that. It's going to destroy us all. I think if we could move towards that kind of thing, we could build a better state.
Thank you. Mr. Summers?
We all know when we go down to the town election, which is usually in March, and you look at the warrant articles and immediately you see that word invest. And you know that invest means that your taxes are going to go up for that. And I know people are having a hard time right now. I know the inflation's way up. Heating oil is short, like you said. Our biggest honorable thing, you might be looking to retire, and yet your 401k might be down $34,000 to $40,000, and so you have to hold off. You have to work a little bit longer before you can use it. Or maybe your biggest equity item is your house. Maybe you wanted to sell it, but now you can't sell it because the price of it's gone down, or now the interest rates are anywhere from 7.4% for your 30-year fixed to a 10-year percent for an ARM right now. So now you're paying the majority of your money to not only stay in the house, you might have to leave, go to a rent place where the rental property has gone up about 25 to 30%. So it's really hard out there right now. So we must be understanding, be able to be friendly to our neighbors, and be considerate to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Bernardi, your closing statement?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this forum. I'm going to say what I would like to do, and the reason I would like to have people vote for me. I think it's very important that we protect the New Hampshire advantage, and that means no sales, no income, no inheritance tax. I think it's also important that we continue to expand the opportunities for educational choice in this state. And contrary to some of the comments that were made here, I think it's very, very important for those opportunities to be there for parents and to expand that, to get the competition we need to get the educational system back to par. It's important to protect the Second Amendment from any crazy new laws that are being that are coming up, particularly red flag laws. It's important to protect human life. And thank you very much.
A red card comes up, doesn't
Red
it?
card comes
It's
up
deadly.
fast.
Ms. Costa, your closing statement, please.
I would like to thank everybody here this evening. I would like to say thank you to Noah Major for his 26 years of service in the House.
May I interrupt you? Mr. Major was on the school board that gave me my very first job here at Timberlane High School in 1966. So it's good to see you again, sir. Please continue, Ms. Costa.
Thank you. I am looking to go to Concord to find some common sense solutions, to work to find solutions for human rights, reproductive rights, education, find a way to work so that our taxes aren't strangling us. Oh, we got something else in common. And I believe just to come back and report in with our constituents. We work for them. And that's where we need to be doing our communication the most, within our communities. Thank you. And I look forward to you all voting for me.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. And Mr. Harb, your closing statement.
Thank you. As many of you know, my family has been here in Plaistow for over 37 years, raised my children here, went to school here. I graduated from the University of Notre Dame. I like to consider myself a Reagan Republican, not just because Ronald Reagan played George Gipp from the University of Notre Dame in the Newt Rockne movie, but because he believed in smaller government and conservative government, and that's what I believe in. In my last 4 years, I've voted for lower dividends and interest tax. I've voted for to lower the business profits tax. I've voted for a balanced budget and for smaller government. So I believe, and I thank you for 4 great years you've allowed me to serve this community, and I'm asking you, please send me back to Concord. My job there is not finished, to protect you, to help you, help our town, our district, and the state of New Hampshire, and I ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
So at this point, I will lift my ban on applause so we can thank the candidates both for running and for Thank you for your very thoughtful answers. I remind you this forum was videotaped and it will be available on the PlaistowAccess channel 17. So tell people who missed it, that they can watch it. It will be available on demand. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your questions. This was a great forum. Thank you all so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More of the things that we take in the morning.
Faster than anyone you